right, Andy, take it away.
Thank you very much, Katie. And as I like to do, I'd like to say good evening, good afternoon, and good morning to everyone joining us. I know we've got quite a few people from all parts of the globe, so I'd like to extend my welcome to everyone as we perform our first look at some of our most recent and I would say important research. But before we get going today, I always like to hear from the audience. So what I'd ask that we do is let's have a look at the poll question that comes up on your screen right now. So what are the top 4 factors that influence buyer decisions? So from your perspective, what do you think are the top 4 factors that you think influence buyer purchase decisions? I know we've got a fairly good cross-section of roles represented on our broadcast here today. So I'm interested to hear from your perspective. There'll be some there'll be enterprise sellers. There'll be those that sell into the mid-market. We have some sales leaders joining us from various size organizations. I can see a lot of small, medium, mid-market enterprise organizations represented. So we've got a really good cross-section of selling roles and sales leadership roles represented here. Interested to hear what we think. So top 4 factors that influence buyer purchase decisions. Let's see what the audience says. So just give you another couple of seconds. No, we've finished that poll. So let's get the results up and see what everyone is thinking. So clear leader there, showing buyers what's possible or how to solve a problem seem to be the standout winner there, closely followed by listening to buyers is one of the key influences for buyer purchase decisions. And then it looks like we follow up closely with our third one, communicating value. And I think we've also got connecting with buyers and building rapport. Thank you very much. That's a really good starting point. That helps level set. Let's have a look at what the research says. First piece of research is an analysis of buyers that we completed back in 2020, right in the at the beginning point of the intense part of the pandemic. And what this reveals is that sellers lack the skills that influence buyers' purchase decisions. That's a critical finding of this research. And we asked buyers, when interacting with sellers virtually at that point, what factors have the greatest influence on your purchase decision? Now, the most influential factor is, as you can see on the left of your screen, leading a thorough discovery of buyers' concerns, wants, and needs. So needs discovery. Now, look at the difference. Look at the big difference between seller effectiveness in terms of what we found versus what impacts, what influences the purchase decision the most. So 71% of buyers say that leading a thorough and impressive needs discovery is highly influential on their purchase decision. Now, there's a couple of schools of thought in terms of this, because I think a lot of you might be sitting there and looking at that first point going, well, isn't that standard? Isn't that sales 101? Isn't that what we're taught? We're all taught at the very beginning of our selling careers. And isn't that the first thing that we focus on as a sales leader with our sellers, making sure that they prepare and execute really good questioning to understand the breadth and depth of customer need? Well, what we typically see is this is one, as we can see here, it's one of the key influences in terms of purchase decision, yet it's often one of the least focused on skills in terms of seller development. And we often think, well, that is a ticket to the dance. That's our intro part. Every seller should be able to do that. What we typically see is a lot of sellers do initially get trained in running and leading effective needs discoveries, but they don't continue to train. They don't hone their skills in terms of doing that. They look at that as too foundational. They often want more advanced skills to be taught and developed in, instead of coming back and constantly looking at ways to improve the way in which we discover needs. And so typically what we see is we see 10, 15, 20-year sales veterans in the field who claim to have 10, 15, 20 years of experience and experience in discovering need. And yet often what we see is it's 1 year of experience repeated 10, 15, 20 times over. We often don't go back and look at that skill set. As sales leaders, we often don't go and really investigate, observe, and coach the development of that skill set. And so we often see that the level of how we show up versus how influential we are in terms of applying that skill and getting the desired result, that gap seems to form more over time. So it's an interesting insight, especially for those sales leaders joining us here. Could the advancement towards improved sales results for your team be as simple as going back and looking at the basics, the fundamentals? So the others that we see there is showing what's possible or solving a problem. That's critically important. Often what we see is the opposite of that, is that sellers turn up, and as soon as they think they have an understanding, a baseline understanding of need of the customer, they go straight into talking about their capabilities, talking about the product capabilities, the service offering capabilities, too early in the conversation, and therefore they lose their effectiveness in that conversation and often lose their ability to influence early. Listening is about not just listening, but actually demonstrated to the buyers that we're listening. And what we also found there is number 4, making the ROI case clear. Big gap there. Showing to the buyer a clear return on investment when it comes to why your product or service is going to bring value to their organization. So it was clear that the clear summary in terms of that is we found that sellers don't have the skills in the areas that are most influence the buyer's decisions. So let's have a look at the most recent research, our 2020 research on top performing sellers. We analyzed responses from 1,004 sellers and sales managers. And as you can see the breakdown there, it's a global study, fairly even distribution of the size of company, and even distribution in terms of the type of industry. And here are some of the questions that we're going to answer as we do a walkthrough of that very fresh and soon to be published. You're getting a sneak peek in terms of the outcomes of that most recent research from the RAIN Group. So the questions that we're going to help answer here today is, what do top performing sellers do differently than other sellers? What skills do they have? And what do organizations do to inspire the best performance from their teams? Lastly, we're going to look at what areas should you focus on when it comes to building a top performing sales team. Important as we begin this journey that we look at, well, what makes up a top performing seller? Here's what we found, and here is the criteria that defined a top performing seller from this research. First of all, they met their annual sales goals. 100% of the top performers that we studied met their annual sales goal. When it comes to challenging their sales goals, the goals, they must have been set. That's a critically important one. They had sales goals. They set sales goals that were extremely and or very challenging. And in terms of win rate, the sellers had a win rate greater than 50%. So top performing sellers had a win rate greater than 50%. And they achieved premium pricing in line with the value they provided. They strongly agreed in terms of that. So what does that summary mean? They're hitting their sales target, they're hitting their sales goal, they're challenging that goal, and not just challenging it. In some cases, we found they're extending that goal. They're pushing the envelope of what's truly possible. They won more than others. They had a very strong win rate, and they were able to achieve premium pricing. There was less margin erosion. They were able to hold the line with price, and there'll be a few reasons as to how and why they were able to do that as we unpack this research a little further as we go now. So bottom line, top performers met challenging goals and achieved higher win rates with premium pricing. I'm sure a lot of the sales leaders are sitting there right now going, Andy, you warmed us up. How do we actually achieve that? Well, that's exactly what we're here to show you in this research preview today. The 5 areas of top sales performance is what we've broken it down into. And we're going to get into those 5, and we'll unpack each of them. So a couple of things really important as per what Katie said and what you've seen. RAIN focuses on a couple of things with these webinars. First of all, it's not just providing research. How do we take the research that we're about to share with you and put it into practical, tangible ways that are going to bring value to your selling organization now. The way in which we've done that in this webinar is at the end of each of these 5 areas, we're going to give you some questions to do an assessment, to do an analysis in terms of where you stand, where your sales team stands, where you as a seller stand in terms of these areas of top sales performance. You will get a copy of this deck, so please, you can capture the screen if you want, but you will also get the text of this, particularly those questions. And that is a really good starting point to convert the information that we share here into, as I said, tangible, practical value, which is what we like to see. It's all great to learn something, but actually the value in the learning doesn't occur until something's done with that information. So keen to see you take this and bring some value from it into your selling organization or your sales approach in the coming days. So the first one is value. What we found was one of the top 5 areas was value is at the center of all of it. And this is specifically at the center of the model which we built from this research. And sellers need to establish value in the minds of the buyer, and they need to do it early. When we look at sales negotiation, and a lot of our clients around the world look at sales negotiation and negotiation skill as something that's really important for a lot of sellers to have. And of course, we help develop those skills within selling organizations throughout the globe. But typically what I find is when we as practitioners go in and we study that selling organization, we study the approach, we study the process, the systems, the people, we often find that what is missing is not the need to have great sales negotiation skills. It's that value is not brought forward, it's not presented, it's not articulated early enough in the sales process with their buyers. So sellers must be valuable themselves and deliver value. So there's quite this, if you unpack what I just said there, sellers must be valuable themselves and also be able to deliver value throughout the sales process. It's not just your products and services where the value lies. Everything is connected to value, and value has quite a few facets. So sellers are often told to focus on value when selling, but they don't truly understand what value is. Now, what we do is we help define value as the collection of reasons a buyer is buying from you. And we view it through the buyer's lens. We don't view it through the seller's lens. We look at value through the eyes of the buyer. And we've been able to break that down. There are 3 buckets that make up our value proposition. We've codified what value looks like for the buyer. And by the way, this is one of our anchor models. It is, in a lot of cases, sellers look at this for the first time and go, this is really profound. And it's actually really simple to consume. Now, simple doesn't mean easy. It's simple to understand because we've done all the hard work. We've codified through the eyes of the buyer. How do they see value? The 3 buckets are resonate, differentiate, and substantiate. So resonate is all about connecting to the need of the buyer. And buyers have to have a want and a need, and that's fairly straightforward. The next one is differentiate. This is a really challenging one for a lot of sellers globally. Differentiate, and a lot of sellers will turn around initially and go, you know what? Our product is there's so many competitors in the market that have like for like products that we have. There's so many other competitors in the market, I should say, that have like for like service offerings. And it might be product and service offerings depending on the industry which you're selling from and into. And so sellers are often really confused by differentiate in terms of value. Why? Because they don't feel they can influence it. They feel a lot of the differentiate sits in product or service offerings. The amazing thing is that buyers tell us differently. They say, actually, what often differentiates, particularly through the sales process, is the way the seller or sellers, if you're selling in teams, the way in which they differentiate themselves and their organization throughout the sales process. So it's not about necessarily product or service offerings. It's about the collection of value that we talked about, that the many facets of what makes up value through the eyes of the buyer. And differentiation is not purely, it's not exclusive to product or service. It's a really important point and often a watershed moment for a lot of sellers when they start to realize, well, if I'm part of that differentiation, how do I differentiate? We can talk about some of those things a little later. So the third part is substantiate. A lot of selling organizations do a pretty good job at substantiation, and that is providing reason as to why a buyer and their organization should trust the commitments you make, the offers that you make, and most importantly, trust that the product, service, solution that you bring to market will actually help them achieve and realize the needs and business outcomes that are connected to that. So what happens? What happens when we start taking away parts of this value proposition, the collection of reasons why buyers buy? Let's say we might differentiate and substantiate, but we don't resonate. What buyers are going to tell us to say that we're not resonating is, you know what, your product, your service offering, your solution that you've put forward looks fantastic. They often are very positive in their response about it, but they'll say, actually, we don't actually think we need it. It's not something that's fit for purpose for us. And what they're saying to us in that case is not that we don't have a need, because often we've uncovered that need and hence why we're presenting a solution that we hope meets it. It's that we haven't done a good enough job in terms of resonating how our product or service offering, our solution actually aligns to that and how it resonates with that need. Now, we might have strong resonance. We might have strong trust in terms of substantiation. But when we fail to differentiate, look at what buyers are often saying to us. What they're saying to you or they're saying to your sellers is, what's your best price? And this is another one. This is often the one where we get into negotiations and negotiation skill. The negotiation skill isn't the issue here. Defending your price, defending your margin is not the issue here. You may have resonated strongly with the need. You may have built trust around your solution and your offering, but they're always asking for a cheaper price. It's because you don't have a pricing problem. You have a differentiation problem. It's not clear to the buyer why you stand out above the rest, why they should pay more, why they should pay what you're asking in terms of your offering, because they don't see it stands out. They don't see a reason why they should pay more versus anything else, because you're not clearly differentiated in their eyes. Now, if you've done a really good job in resonating, you've differentiated, a lot of sellers will think, hang on, that's a very compelling value proposition. We're clearly connected with the need. We resonate strongly with the need in terms of how we're going to solve for it, how we're going to bring value to the organization. We are different in the eyes of the buyer. But what happens if you haven't effectively substantiated? They're going to be saying to you, I can't risk it. We can't take the risk with your offering for a variety of reasons. Why? Because we failed to substantiate. So when you have all of these three ingredients, what buyers tell us is that is a very compelling value proposition. And often it leads to you being awarded the business over someone else. And to the point where we showed you those elements of top performance, of what the criteria of top performing sellers at the beginning. This is the stepping stone to really help become top performing by making sure that value is at the center of what you do, and that you have these ingredients in your value proposition to make sure that it is most compelling. So here's what the research said in terms of top performers versus the rest when it came to value against those three buckets of resonate, differentiate, substantiate. So top performers are more likely than the rest to make and communicate a strong ROI, and they are able to present the overall value case in a compelling and persuasive way. And they build a sense of urgency because of that, so that buyers are clear in terms of why they should act, and most importantly, why they should act now. When it comes to differentiate, they are more likely in terms of making the differentiation case for their offering and doing so in a way that's compelling to the buyer and helps them stand out above the rest, clearly in the eyes of the buyer. They make the case that we're the best choice versus our competitors. So that's fairly straightforward, that one. And it substantiates what it showed, this top performing sellers are more likely than the rest to inspire confidence in buyers and know and highlight the results that they have achieved for others that are aligned to the results that the buyer is looking to achieve by engaging with you and your service offering. So here's that self-assessment. We're going to move on to our second area now. Before we do that, as I said, we're going to give you some questions that you can ask of you as as a seller, you as your selling organization, in terms of assessing where you sit with each of these 5 areas. As you can see on screen at the moment, there's quite a few questions around the self-assessment for value. But I'll summarize that by saying, think in terms of resonate, differentiate, substantiate. And for those of you who are sellers, think about and wash some of your current opportunities and pursuits through that model and see where you stand. Be as objective as you possibly can. Remember, we assess that through the eyes of the buyer. So be as objective as you can as you wash some of your current opportunities through that. And you might identify some gaps very quickly that could help you close those gaps and make your value proposition much more compelling. The second area that we're going to look at is winning the sale. Now, we're going to head to you right now, and I'm interested in your thoughts when it comes to this second area of winning the sale. So the poll, which is coming on your screen right now, is asking you which selling skill represents the biggest gap between top performers and the rest. Now, for those of you who were paying attention a little earlier on, we might have already given that answer, but we're checking in on this. Why? Because this has a significant influence when it comes to winning the sale. So we're going to reconnect with that. We're going to give you a couple more seconds, probably 10 more seconds to answer that poll. Which selling skill represents the biggest gap between top performers and the rest? Let's see what everyone thinks in terms of that. All right, results are coming on. Thank you. Look at that. We've got some people paying close attention, leading a thorough, impressive needs discovery, and influencing buyer thinking about solutions they need. Thank you very much for that, Katie. Let's have a look at what the research says. So it's not surprising that top performers have stronger skills across the sales cycle. And what is surprising is the strength and breadth of their capabilities compared to the rest. Now, they're not just a little stronger in 1 or 2 categories. They are stronger across the board. And this is the percent they are more likely to excel in a skill compared to the rest. And remember, the rest represent 81% of respondents in our research, and that's more than 3/4 of sellers. So for an example, 81% when it comes to overcoming price pressure and maintaining deal margins, they have higher win rates and they aren't winning by discounting. Imagine that. I know there's a lot of you that may be on this call that look at that and go, I can win without discounting. But hang on a sec. Our buyers are always asking for price discounts. It's built into our approach. Now that says something. If you have to build it into your approach, you have to factor in discounting. What does that say in terms of how we're showing up and the skill levels that we may need, the skill levels that are representative in either you as a seller or your selling organization that we may need to go to work on so that we can protect our margin and discount less. 65% leading a highly effective proposal and finalist presentation. Now this is where the rubber meets the road. Really, we've done all the hard work. We've got what we think could be a compelling value proposition and solution that we're presenting. And yet 65% say that leading a highly effective proposal and finalist presentation, they're strong at the end of the sales process when it comes time to present. They've done all the hard work and they know how to bring it home. They know how to anchor the pursuit and bring it home really strongly. 58% leading a thorough needs discovery. Now, as I said, this is kind of a pet project of mine where we see tremendous value when we go back and hone the skills of both new and experienced sellers to leading thorough needs discoveries. Why? That is often where the greatest miss is. We miss what the buyer is telling us because we're too keen to tell them what we think and what we know. The longer you stay in discovery, the greater the breadth, the greater the depth of needs you uncover, the greater the opportunity is going to be for you to really understand what value looks like for the buyer. And often it's in needs discovery. You can also, by holding and discovering further, differentiate yourself further down the line. So top performers understand this, and they lead, obviously, as we see, a much more thorough and impressive needs discovery. 57% on that last one, influencing buyers thinking about solutions that they need. So let's have a look at this. Here's the difference across the sales cycle. Now, there's a lot of detail on this screen. We're not going to go into each of it now. You will get the presentation, as we said, but I want to share with you and emphasize the point that not any one capability that distinguishes the best sellers. It's the mix of capabilities. It's the breadth and depth that is so impressive when it comes to top performers. Top performers have strong capabilities across the sales cycle. Now let's jump into this a little bit further. So the percentage of top performers are more likely to excel at these specific skills. So in addition to the selling skills, it's sellers' ability to manage their opportunities that is equally as important. And these 11 specific areas stood out as statistically significant, I should say, in the difference between top performers versus the rest. Now, these skills are critically important to moving opportunities through the pipeline in order to get a win. And most sellers have felt the frustration of having a buyer who should have bought from them, and they end up going and buying from another. I know we've all experienced that at some point. And often this is because the other seller simply outplanned. That's a big one, because when they outplan really well, they're going to outmaneuver you, and ultimately they're going to outsell you. And sellers who deftly and skillfully manage the sales opportunity both win more sales overall and win more competitive bids. So let's focus on a few of these. I'm not going to focus on all. I'm just going to hone in on a couple. And remember, when I'm honing in on things, I'm from the sales practitioner side. My role and my global team's role is to go into, and we work with privilege of working with some of the biggest brands in the world, and going into their selling organizations and really unpacking and discovering what is going on. We do this analysis day in, day out to uncover where across the sales cycle are there skill deficiencies? Where are we not showing up? Where are the gaps so that we can help our clients define the skill sets and the skill gaps to go and fill those gaps and make meaningful progress towards improving their sales result. So here's a couple I've highlighted from this research that I think are really important for us to unpack. So they lead highly effective proposal and finals presentations. So we've landed on that point already. What do? They bring it home really strong. The amount of times I see, and often really technical sellers do a brilliant job in terms of needs discovery, analysis, defining value, crafting a compelling value proposition. They turn up at their finalist presentations and they bomb, because they go, we've done all the work. We've got the most compelling solution and value proposition, the best pricing, but they don't actually hone their skills in terms of how they communicate that at the final moments where it counts the most. So if you've got finalist presentations and you've got a lot of proposals, you've got to think in terms of, well, actually, have we revisited how we put our proposals together in the last year, the last few years, the last 5 years? I came to a selling organization just a couple of months ago, and I was sitting down with the CEO and the sales director, and they said to me, we haven't changed the way we go to market since we started the company 30 years ago. Now that's telling, isn't it? It means we've found a way that we think works a long time ago, and we've rinsed and repeated that. And ultimately what's happened over time is its effectiveness has slightly waned to the point where we're like, what do we do? How do we fix this? Why isn't what we were doing working now like it used to? I'd like you to think about this. As a human being, has anything changed in your life in the last year? I would say most of us right now would probably put their hand up. Yeah, there's been some changes in life. So do you think as something has changed in your life in the last year, that your needs around whatever that change is have evolved, shifted, or you may have a new set of needs? What about the last 2 years? I know we've all experienced change in the last 2 years with the advent of the pandemic. That's changed our needs set. That's changed what and how we buy and what is going to resonate with those needs. The exact same is with our buyers that we are seeking to sell into. Things change for them all the time, depending on your industry, just depending on the external market impacts and effects that are going on. Their need sets might change weekly, but a lot of them, they'll definitely change over a month, over a quarter, over a year. And so it's critically important that we evolve our skills and most importantly, our approach and thinking towards buyers to adapt to that change always, not just think that what we've done and how we think and how we approach can stay the same. It must evolve to stay at, or in some cases, the top performers, they're always ahead of market. They're always changing up their thinking, their approach, the way in which they perceive value, the way in which they communicate value in different ways. And one of the ways is they're constantly looking at their proposals and the way in which they show up in their presentations. The other one is developing buyer champions to advocate. it is really clear to see. And by the way, this isn't your best mate who works in another organization who's going to help get you in. That's not the champion we're talking about. The way in which we define champions, particularly when it comes to large, big, and worthy opportunities that we're seeking to win, is a champion that advocates for you. By the way, you may not even have a friendly relationship. They just see that your product, service, solution offering is something that is going to bring so much benefit and value to the organization. They are going to help champion the cause of getting that into the organization. But the sellers identify that and they develop those champions within inside the buying organization. And we saw that come about really regularly and often with our top performing sellers. So the last one I want to just focus in on quickly is that they develop strong action plans to win the most important sales opportunities. So there's a very clear difference between those teams and those sellers who win often versus the rest who don't. And one of those key things is the ones that win plan the most. And that's quite foreign. Some of you might be thinking there, how do I plan? Well, they take an opportunity planning approach to their significant, worthy sales opportunities that they want to win. They unpack what are the critical components that we must plan in and then we must execute in order to win. And that is a stark difference that we see between top performers and the rest from a practitioner's level as we go into different selling organizations and we observe top performance versus those who aren't executing those top performing aspects and skills. So winning the sales self-assessment, there's some what do we got there? There's 6 questions that you can ask. We're going to share them out as we go. I'm not going to labor those, but they're a really good starting point to start converting what we're seeing here in this research into, as I said, tangible value for you as a seller or you as a selling or for those that lead selling organizations. Third area is they drive account growth. Now, as I said, your buyer's world is constantly changing and their needs are constantly evolving. And so what we see is a stark difference between top performers when it comes to approaching existing customers. Because I often go in and I talk to some of, great account managers, great account directors. They've held their number, but they haven't grown their number. They haven't grown their share of wallet with inside their accounts. A couple of things that they say. One, my job is to keep our customers happy. Okay, what does that mean? It means keeping the status quo. It means keeping the service offering and how we're servicing them right. And it means being really responsive to their requests. And then we go to the buyers and we say, when it comes to those who are serving you, that you're an existing customer of, what are the attributes of those who stand out versus those who don't? And it's day and night in terms of what they tell us. They tell us this, they say, well, actually, those account managers, those account directors that absolutely stand out, that we see as trusted partners, as those, really valuable sources that are going to help us solve problems and realize goals, are constantly bringing new ideas. They're constantly bringing new opportunities for us to realize our objectives and partner in us, with us to achieve those objectives, or they're coming constantly and showing us ways in which we can solve our problems. And so what we find is there's 3 key things that stand out. If you look at our top performing account manager research, top performance in key account management, I should say, the 3 things that help them stand out is we can go in an organization and we can tell the top performers in account management and who are driving growth because they achieve their revenue number out of those accounts each and every year and increased level of revenue each and every year. They achieve an increased level of profit from their accounts each and every year, and their level of customer satisfaction grows year on year. So the customer's happy, the selling organization is making more money and more revenue, more revenue and profit, I should say, from that organization. So let's see how that's broken down when it comes to top performers and how they are more likely to excel in specific skills when it comes to account growth. They don't take an approach. Their mindset isn't about status quo. Their mindset isn't about reactive behaviors. Their mindset is around a couple of things. I'm just going to hone in on a few of these for you. First one is they develop and foster enterprise level relationships. Top performers are not afraid to get involved and understand the complexity of their buyer's organization. And they spend time building relationships, not on friendship, but on value. It's a real different, it's totally different, right? A lot of a lot of sellers believe that friendship, that is important. It's a core thing. If someone doesn't know you, like you, trust you, I mean, we all know that it's going to be difficult to build a relationship, but a relationship has much more in it in the selling world than purely a friendship. And so top performing sellers develop and foster enterprise level relationships. They understand their buyer's business and they're seen as a value adding provider at every touch point. The next one from this is that they identify where they can add additional value. As I said, they're constantly looking at ways through what they know about their account to solve problems and help their accounts achieve real, meaningful objectives that they are seeking to achieve, that the buyer is seeking to achieve, not the seller. It's quite profound. I know it's simple, but it has a massive difference between those who stand out as top performers and those who are in that lesser group of the rest. I know we all want to make that shift. Some of us may be looking at these areas so far and going, you know what? When it comes to the self-assessment, the questions that you're asking me, Andy, we're doing really well so far. Some of you might be looking at this and asking these questions and going, we can do it. We can do a lot better. And by the way, this is just a moment in time. So that's why these assessments are so critically important. We ask really good questions of ourselves and our selling organizations. And growth, the opportunity for us to grow and achieve better results is often in the answers to these questions. So they're the questions for driving account growth. Let's have a look at number 4. We're moving through at a good pace. Succeeding with people. So think of a seller you know who has key relationships with influential executives and referral sources. They have regular, rich, deep, meaningful conversations with their key relationships, and they get people to take action and pursue priorities that are most helpful to them. I can definitely think of my top 5 sellers who I've met, who we've worked with, who kind of sit up there that do that really well. These sellers are great with people. And within the category of people, there are 3 areas. So there are relationships, there are conversations, and there is influence. So they're the 3 aspects there when it comes to people. Relationships, and remember my definition that I just gave you in relationships, it's well beyond friendship in terms of that. It's not about just being friendly. Relationships of value in business have many more ingredients. It's about the conversations that they execute and also the influence that they yield. So here's the percentage of top performers that are more likely to excel in these specific skills when it comes to the fact that they're more effective with people. Once again, let me hone in on a couple of these. First of all, they inspire buyers to reach out for advice. Now think about that. If you as a seller are not being pinged, if your buyers aren't reaching out to you and they're not asking you questions around specific areas of need that they have that are ongoing as their world changes and shifts, they obviously aren't seeing you as a rich source of value. How can you become a rich source of value? How can you demonstrate a very deep understanding of their world and then align value to that world regularly, so much so that it inspires them to reach out to you for advice? I think it's a critical one. I'm often seeing top performing sellers, their phone is constantly in use, and that's right, people call them, not just text them, not just shoot them a LinkedIn message or an email, but calling them to help provide advice on critical matters as their world changes. The next one is they collaborate deeply with buyers across the buying process. This is another standout one for me. And the ones I've chosen here that are standing out is because we see them. We see them day in, day out. We see them and we see these aspects help the seller differentiate in the eyes of the buyer in the live selling world. So they collaborate deeply with buyers across the buying process. Collaboration isn't about telling. Collaboration is often about finding some really good stimulus, finding a hot topic, finding a place, an item, a concern, a problem, a challenge, a goal, and bringing that to the table and then bringing some ideas to start that collaboration. So we need a cause, we need a purpose to begin with to collaborate. And then the starting point for us as sellers is just to find some ideas that we can bring to the table just to commence the collaboration and making sure that the topic area is most important. to the buyer or the buying teams that you may be engaging with in order to start that collaboration. So there are a couple that we look at in that fourth area when it comes to succeeding with people. And here's your self-assessment in terms of that. So we've covered 4 of the areas that define top performing sellers. So 5 ways, or 5 of the ways that top performing sellers outperform the rest. There's your self-assessment for number 4. Let's head in to number 5. This is a little bit of where we move into kind of territory that applies to everyone, not just sellers, not just sales leaders. But what we found that one of the key areas that top performers outperform the rest is how they maximize their level of personal effectiveness. This is one of the most surprising findings of our research. There's a strong correlation between sellers' productivity, their behaviors, their habits, and their likelihood to be top performers. And here are the areas that really shone through in the research. Once again, you can unpack each of these as you review the research pack that we send you. But I'm just going to hone in on a couple that we see have the most significant impact live in the field. So first of all, the top performers focus on their own agenda and they don't get derailed by others' agenda. Now that's interesting because you're saying, hang on, Andy, we need to be focused on what buyers want. Value is through the eyes of the buyer, yet top performers focus on their own agenda and they don't let others derail the agenda. That's correct. You can do both. But what top performers are clear on is what their agenda is. They have an agenda. They have a purpose. They have a mission. They have a goal, not just it might be from an account perspective. They may have a goal from an opportunity perspective. But they're clear on that goal and they're clear on the agenda that's going to help them realize that, and they don't let others derail their progress towards achieving that goal with that agenda. It's a standout point. Happy to deep dive on this further, but remember we're sharing we're giving you insight, sneak peek in terms of what we found in the research. The how-tos, as I said, we can unpack a little later, or feel free to reach out after and we can have a conversation. Here's the next one, 67% change habits when needed to improve results. There's that word again, change. Top performers adapt, they're agile. There's that buzzword, it's been around for many years, agile. What does agile mean? Pretty much that. When it comes to the specifics of what agility looks like from a top performing sales perspective, they change habits when needed to improve results. If those habits that are getting them the results that they want yield results that they don't want, they look at the habits that help create those and they change them. And they often, when they change them, realize outsized returns by changing habits. They look inward instead of looking outward at all the factors. That's what the rest do. There's a lot of blame game. Well, it's the market, it's the economy, it's the product set, it's a service offering, it's this, it's that, it's our organization. By the way, if there's anyone who thinks like that, just ask them, has anyone ever worked for a perfect organization? The answer is no. The problem is never within the organization. It's always in the mirror. It's hard to say that. I know a lot of sales leaders out there that find that conversation very difficult. You want me to go and tell what I think is a top performing seller that they should look in the mirror? Absolutely. Because we know that real top performers look in the mirror most, particularly when it comes to their habits. That was a real standout one because we see that, as I said, very often when we're out in the selling world. Last one I highlight is they get the most done and produced in the time available. So they've got a clear goal, they've got a clear agenda in terms of account focus, in terms of winning the sales opportunity, advancing the sales opportunity. They evolve their habits, they look in the mirror, there's a lot of self-reflection, but they get the most done and they produce the most in the time available. I can think of sellers that I often talk about. I think of them as avatars of top performance, and this is what they do. They are ridiculously good at blocking out those things in their day that will not advance towards their result. And they actually don't apologize for it. They are just very clear. If you want my focus and time, it needs to be aligned to the direction in which I'm heading. And they're very clear in how they execute the activities required to get the outcome they want within the time that they have available. We all have the same amount of time. I know a lot of us have done time management courses, and we've learned but this is beyond that. They look at time in a different way, is probably the headline I can best describe that as. They don't look at it like the rest do. They look at it in some cases in 5-minute increments in an 8-hour day. Now, let's say for you look at things in a calendar on meetings. They don't look in terms of meetings. They look at outcomes of meetings, and are those outcomes of meetings going to help advance my performance as a seller towards the outcome? Great top performing sales leaders don't look at days in terms of meetings, don't look at terms of the cadence and volumes. They look at what is the value that we're seeking to extract in that investment of time, and is it going to help us move closer or further away from our sales organization's goals? As I said, it's a mindset shift that we found that often is directly correlated to these productive behaviors. There's a self-assessment in terms of personal effectiveness. I really hope that you've got lots of value so far in terms of understanding the 5 ways top performing sellers outperform the rest. Now, I'm going to give you a snapshot. I'm going to give you some more tangible information, particularly for those of you who are in a sales leadership role right now. Because I reckon if I was a sales leader, I'd be sitting there right now going, right, I understand what the 5 ways from a seller's perspective are, but how do we impact seller success? What are the external factors that impact seller success? So there's a couple of things you can see on screen here. You can enable them to become this way through really effective sales coaching and management, through a really effective sales training and effective sales performance, and in the environment in which you're operating. Now, for those of you who haven't read it yet, there is another piece of research that we've already released in terms of this around the top performing sales manager. There's webinars that we've recorded in terms of this, so I'd go back to those and grab those. We go into much more detail around those 3 elements, but I'm just going to give you a snapshot in terms of how does effective sales management and leadership impact the ability for your selling organization to realize a high volume of top performing sellers. So the formula for success, as you can see, is sellers are 63% more likely to be a top performer when they have these. First of all, an effective manager. Effective managers have a significant impact on top performance and top performance in selling inside an organization. You need to then couple that with regular coaching. Andy, I do not have time to coach. Have you seen the demands that my organization put on me in terms of, we can replay that time and time again. Top performing sales leaders, top performing sales managers, shift that thinking. You know what? I can't afford not to coach. Like, think about top performance in sport. Think about top performance in anything worthy. You'll track it back to a really effective leader who coaches the team constantly to identify gaps and fill those gaps and move steps closer towards peak performance. And then what you need to couple coaching with is really effective training. What is training? Training is not sitting in a room or sitting on a Zoom or sitting on a Teams and turning up and going, yep, I've got all this knowledge now. Sellers have an abundance of knowledge, and yet it's worthless because they often do nothing with it. So it's not about training is the answer. Training is never the answer. Training is a starting point where we get new ideas, new knowledge, new understanding of skills that needs to be matched in the environment with really effective management around the application of those skills, and then the reinforcement of those skills through really effective coaching. And so it's about an environment. I keep using that word. It's about the selling environment. It's about the totality that creates top performance, not just focusing on the individual skills for the seller. It's about us as leaders as well. So how do we accelerate seller results? Well, you can see what we are looking at here is the impact of manager coaching and sales training on seller performance. Once again, what our research clearly shows, it's all 3. It's not one of. If you're a really good sales manager, but you don't coach and you don't develop, your team's often going to stay in the same point or go backwards. You're just going to be managing more intensely. That's the reality a lot of sales managers have, is they constantly complain about their time or lack thereof, and they constantly complain about the demands of their organization. Actually, you don't have a time issue. You don't have a demands issue. You have a lack of one of these three ingredients in terms of filling that gap towards becoming more effective as both a manager, a coach, and a developer of people. And that's what we know. When there's a combination of those three, it accelerates seller results. So effective training and a low manager effectiveness, the sellers are successful despite their managers. So we see organizations where managers are perhaps not as good at their job as they're meant to be, but we see a really effectively trained sales force. We see a lot of sellers who are successful. If we have ineffective training and low manager effectiveness, that might be the issue that some of you are facing. Performance is going to drop away. This is the kiss of death. This is you might be in a death spiral, and you may not even realize it. And then the winning combination is going to be rare to find. So here's a roadmap for seller success, and I think it's really important that we summarize this before we finish up. First of all, as we said, this links to what we started with today. Value needs to be at the center of everything we do, and that value is centered around the buyer. We need to focus in terms of winning the sale and the elements that we've talked about that we define top performers do in terms of winning the sale, and how, and you'll see in our top performing manager research, how managers support the winning of the sale through what they do with their top performing sellers. It's about driving account growth. It's about succeeding with people and maximizing personal effectiveness. And so when it comes to enabling the success in these areas, we need to develop effective sales training. That is proven. That is really clear in terms of the overall top performing selling organization. We need to develop effective managers who deliver a regular rhythm of coaching. And ultimately, we need to cultivate an environment that supports top sales performance. So what I'd like to do is hear from you for the last time. Which areas do you need to focus on at your organization? There is no development and growth without reflection on where we're at right now. And what I'd like you to do is think about, from your perspective as a seller, selling inside your organization, outside to your buyers, or if you're leading sales organizations, based on the conversation that we've had so far today, what do you need to focus on? What's your biggest gap? Which of the elements in either top performing sales or top performing seller, the 5 areas, or the areas that we talked about in terms of enabling that from a management and leadership perspective, which of those areas do you need to focus on at the moment? Let's just have a quick look at where, as an audience group, we are at the moment. And this is just, as I said, a moment in time. Let's see what our colleagues in the selling profession are facing at the moment. Well, there's 3 clear standouts there. So achieving the outcome. So value. Value is a big area that we need to focus on. That's a great assessment. And obviously more than half of us are wanting to focus in that area. That is, if that is either been encouraged, or for some of you, you've actually gone, we really haven't thought about that ever or in a long while. I'm really glad you joined us here today, and hopefully that's your key takeaway that you can go and think about and then plan for how you address that inside your selling organization. Personal effectiveness, it shouldn't be surprising to us that it's up there. It's just beaten by sales management and coaching. We need to invest in our sales managers. I often say that we work with some really big organization, the VP of sales, global head of sales, global heads of growth. We jump into meetings together, and they're always talking about how we need to improve our seller effectiveness, how we've got to develop our sellers, how we need to improve our skills and move our sellers towards top performance. And then we pause and say, okay, that's great, but what about those who lead them? How much are we investing in those important souls who are leading and have a multiplying effect on all of these sellers? Because it's not the development of the sellers in terms of training and development that's important. It's the environment that they come back into and live in that is most important in terms of realizing outsized returns from any development program. They can't come back into the same environment. And the most impactful part of that environment is the sales leader and the sales leadership in terms of what they do to support the evolution, growth, change, development of that environment towards top performance. I'm not surprised. Thank you for your honesty in terms of that. Sales management and coaching, critically important. And last but not least, as I said, I nearly jumped on it a second. It's actually the third, personal effectiveness. It is a critical one. It is coming up in our research more and more and more in the selling world globally. Is personal effectiveness, is how productive I am each and every day with the hours I have, the same as our competitors, and how I use those hours. Thank you very much, Katie. That is fantastic. We are going to finish up here. We're nearly on time. I don't think it's any secret you know what we do. I like to describe Rain Group as a sales transformation company, not a sales training company. Training is a really easy way for our customers to understand, or our future customers to understand, what we actually do tangibly. What we seek to inspire and realize is transformation in sales organizations. And that's taking world-class IP methodology and tools, adapting them, contextualizing them, bringing them to life inside selling organizations, and working with sales leaders to reinforce all of those wonderful things that you can see on screen at the moment to make meaningful change towards improved business outcomes and sales outcomes in their organization. That is what we call client results internally, and that is what we focus on. Is how do we help what value to our clients is the improved sales result, is the improved business outcomes. And that's what we help our clients do each and every day, navigate towards the outcome that they want, not just train their people. And I think that's a big difference that you'll find in terms of Rain. We talk about unleashing sales potential. And once we do that, we achieve great sales transformation outcomes for our clients. So I don't need to labor that point. You're obviously here because we've either helped you, you've either heard how we've helped others, or you're interested in how we might work together in the future. If you are not, and you are just here for world-class research, you're very welcome to come back as well. We're a generous brand, and we hope you got value from today's all of today's information that we've shared. As we said, by the end of the week, you will receive this information in your email. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to switch to back to you, Katie, quickly. Are there any questions that I might cover in 60 seconds? Was there a first one that you can throw at me that we can answer?
All righty. We'll see if you can answer it in 60 seconds. This is a two-parter, so 30 seconds each. Are there detailed competency descriptions available that support the elements of this model, and possibly a formal method for evaluating the skills to help sellers recognize their blind spots?
Yeah, I mean, capability assessment, skills assessment, absolutely. I mean, it's a starting point that some clients like to go with. Some are already really clear in terms of assessments or observational assessments they've done of their sales organizations. So the answer to that is yes. Get in touch. We're happy to talk through what available options there are. Are you on mute?
One day I will learn. So the rest of these questions are all about looking back at the slides. And like Andy said, everyone will be getting the slides sent to them later by the end of this week as a PDF. Excellent.
Katie, thank you very much. Thank you to everyone. Please, if there are specific questions, I am willing to answer them via LinkedIn. Just reach out and connect with me. I'm happy to start a conversation if you've got some questions from what we've covered that, hey, I just really would like you to, cast your eye over something. I will do my best to get back to everyone as I normally do. It won't be overnight, but I will get back to you. So reach out on LinkedIn. Thank you to everyone. I'm going to call it there, and then we'll, if we've got the opportunity to answer some of these questions via reaching out to you on email, we'll do that as well. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I appreciate the time.
Thank you, everyone. That concludes our webinar for today.